2 of our 5 leading issues. The first, really sustainability, really preparation for disasters, addressing the global crisis of climate change, started with a very lively plenary that really was introduced by Reverend Jerry Pillay of the World Council of Churches, who really challenged us to adjust and rethink theologies, metanoia. His speech, which we'll all reread, I think really put many of the central issues involved right on the table. And we then went straight into the discussion in the plenary session, where I think that the 2 themes that came out to me were the question of awareness and the involvement of religious communities in going from the very local to the very global, but also the questions of accountability. And I think that those stayed with us through the day. We went on to one of the series of 6 breakouts. I was part of one that was focused on crossing bridges among the different sectors. So one of the words we're hearing very often is silos, the whole sense of people being divided into different ways of thinking, different ways of living and being, and the vital importance in our interconnected world of bringing them all together. There were 5 other sessions, and as we've said before, there are note takers or rapporteurs in each session, and we will be distilling as well as making the recordings of each of those sessions available. We then went on to the next theme. So the 4th theme was related to sustainability and the G20 objectives, but also to the critical issues of disaster preparation, prevention, response, and the way that that fits into the overall questions of climate change. We then went on to the final plenary, which focused on the vital issue of vulnerability. And that, in one sense, was one of the liveliest discussions that we've heard here, because it challenged us with all of the basic issues of inequality. Because we know that each and every one of us is vulnerable. Each and every one of us has vulnerabilities. But we know that vulnerability is unequal, and that it's of critical importance that we have an understanding of that. And so then we went again into a series of breakout groups. I was part of the one that focused on refugees and migrants. In every case, when I asked people how the sessions went, the responses, with very few exceptions, has been that they have been exciting, lively, informative, and challenging. And so I think it will behoove us well to listen to them. One final comment, a group here that we have not mentioned and highlighted before is the group of Catholic sisters who are here with the support of the Hilton Foundation. And they're also related to a Georgetown University program on women's leadership. But I think that their presence is, in some senses, a response to the challenge of bringing women's voices, but even more women's agendas, into the global agenda and into our discussions within the specific religious interfaith context. We're now going to hear a video message from Vinu Aram from India. Vinu's video got here later than the early session, but she is one of the many partners in our network of networks. And she is also, as are Ndidi, Amanda, Musimbi, Naila, and so many others, global women leaders who come from a religious perspective. She's the co-president of Religions for Peace. She's also involved with the Arigato Global Network of Religions for Children. And so she is one of our vital partners. So over to Vinu.
Warm greetings from India to each of you who have gathered for the G20 Interfaith Forum in South Africa.
Do you want to take this off?
Whenever we meet in these global meetings, there is the possibility of not only listening to one another, but I think also the possibility of daring to dream, daring to do what we can do together. So allow me in the next 2 or 3 minutes to share my thoughts, both as president of Shanti Ashram, but also as co-moderator of Religions for Peace, where we constantly and continuously harness the power of interfaith collaboration. If you look around the world today, of course, what consumes you is violence, violent images, and the consequence of violence in people's lives. I know you will speak about it. So allow me the freedom to step back and to think about 3 things which I hope can add to the richness of your conversation. The first is Swadharma, a concept in India where one is allowed the freedom to connect with oneself, our own innate nature. And by connecting with oneself and people around, we find our purpose. In gatherings such as this, while it seems intense and many people and many sessions, I have always found the time to find my quiet corner, to find the time with my conscience, my mind, and the ability to do something, to find and renew my Swadharma, the purpose and the innate nature of a person. Of course, when we meet like this, and I saw the beautiful group photo you took at the G20 Interfaith Forum yesterday, the image itself speaks for itself, where people, diverse stakeholders, including religious communities, religious leaders, people from government, people who bring service to community, the last mile connectors, you're all together here. We have a beautiful word in the Indian tradition, we call it satsang, the company of good and able people. I hope that is also a gift you will take back from this G20 Interfaith Forum. Satsang, the company of people who are not only good, who have connected with their Swadharma, but as communities want to do something that can make this world a better place. This satsang doesn't happen automatically. There is a convening that is necessary. And therefore, my congratulations to the leadership of the G20 Interfaith Forum for convening so many of you at a time where the world has seen the highest spike in violence and conflict, at a time where children are experiencing deprivation, poverty, and almost a lack of hope. Many, many children are out of their homes. They are in camps, in refugee camps. Many, many children are deprived their fundamental rights to food, to education, to love and to life. Here the satsang has a greater meaning. As I speak of Swadharma and I speak of satsang, I have to speak about action. You in the forum are speaking about Ubuntu in action, a thought and a concept that our African brothers and sisters have given the entire world. I am because you are, Ubuntu. And you have added to it Ubuntu in action. I hope when you leave the forum, you will have concrete ideas and the energy to do what we can do together. There are 2 areas that I want to flag off. One, coming from the world of children, the experience of hunger, the weaponization of food, the breakdown of the chain of food distribution, and the inability of children to have a decent life with food is bothering me. It is bothering me every day. This is not the world experience that children must have in the most formative period of their life. Please consider looking at the area of food and nutritional security. Professor M.S. Swaminathan, the famous agriculture scientist who won the first World Food Prize, said, "The future of a nation is not a nation with guns. The future of a nation is good where there is grains for everyone. The second that I want you to consider is the climate for peace. We have just celebrated the 80th year of the bombing of Hiroshima. The suffering, the consequence of violent means stares at us from Hiroshima, but also in the conflicts around the world. So Ubuntu in action, amongst everything else that we discussed, please consider discussing food and nutritional security, and please consider discussing also how we can create a public opinion, a public climate, an environment where we can dream of peace. From the land of Mahatma Gandhi, I send you greetings. From the land of 1 billion people, I look at you with hope so that we can do what we must do together. Ubuntu in action. The realization of the message, I am because you are. My congratulations again to both the conveners and the leadership, including my dear friend Dr. Catherine Marshall, but all of you and the participants who have decided to come together to do something for our global family.
Thank you. Well, I believe that over the course of the past 4 days, we have heard a lot, we've written a lot of notes. Now it's time for us to engage in interactive fishbowl discussions that will be split into breakout sessions. If you refer to the program, you'll see that different topics are allocated to different rooms. The food fishbowl session will be in this ballroom, breakout room 1. The education session will be in breakout room 3. The data global governance will be in breakout room 4, disaster preparedness, breakout room 5, and vulnerable communities in breakout room 6. May we start moving to our prompt locations.
Can I, is it on? Can you hear me? Yes. Can I ask everybody that want to participate in the discussion on food, if it's possible to come closer, that we have at least can see one another here in front. And if you can close the doors at the back so that we don't get the influence from everybody coming in and out, please. Well, I think we should get started. This morning's session, I'm not supposed to make any speech or whatever. This is an open session for discussion, awaiting. We are not many people, so there's more than enough time to give short inputs and response. If it's possible, not long speeches, but very practical guidelines of what is the low-hanging fruit if you want to make progress in terms of food security. I just want to say, I was reflecting on this morning's session and thought food is a focus point, but food is never just about food. There are many issues linked to it. In my own notes, the whole issue of advocacy is an essential part of all faith communities in terms of how do we shape priorities. What are the quick wins we can get if we want to improve food security? In my own country, policy reform is one of the challenges. There are specific policies in South Africa that hinders collaboration and effectiveness. In the way the state management is managing its resources, in the way there's lack of cooperation between different ministries in some issues. So policy reforms is definitely something we can achieve quickly without lots of investments, just to make sure that systems work more effectively. Another one that I listed is food issues always related to health, community health, food cooperation in food security gives you leverage to address many other issues. And we're dealing with a lot of health issues and substance abuse issues in our communities. Food is not about food parcels. There are cases where food parcels as an emergency play a role, but ultimately food is about sustainability and healthy, nutritious meals, not only because that's one of our problems in South Africa, is the nutrition quality of what people are eating. In COVID, faith communities in South Africa collected a lot of data. If you deal with food security, you have to put systems in place of monitoring and getting accurate data to see what's happening. I've got a last point here. In South Africa, whenever there's disaster, sometimes there are some agencies that rush to get on TV as quickly as possible. I know why they do that, because you need the exposure to get money for what you're doing. But most often, the people that do most of the work never get on TV. It's the people that are locally based that makes a difference to their neighbors, reaching out to them. So these are only notes I want to share with you in my introduction. The floor is open for discussion totally. Any input, I would appreciate if you could keep it short. I would even appreciate it more if you can send us a note or scribble a note that we can capture for follow-up. Part of the discussion last night that I had with several people is how do we maintain the context and the good ideas that we've shaped here to take it further after this conference. So the floor is open. Anybody? Yes.
Good morning, and thank you so much for the great submissions. My name is Oliver Chikuzore, and I'm representing One Map Africa. So I want to make a brief recommendation, and of course, also an example of what we are doing. One Map Africa is based in Ghana. We have 32 chapters in different countries, and what we do, we acquire and collaborate with local partners, with land, and we do smart agriculture, from training to producing, as well as to making sure that these local communities have got enough food, but also they have surplus food to be able to do business. The former President Thabo Mbeki did mention a couple of years ago that we need to encourage each other, because our young people, they think that food comes from the shops, food comes from the garden. So if we can also start promoting in urban areas, community backyard gardens as well, but also smart agriculture, and creating awareness to young people that agriculture is not just working with mud. Agriculture is also food science, also the entire value chain. So encouraging one another and creating awareness to young people, mostly to inspire them to be in agriculture, but also to collaborate intentionally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other input?
I'll give. Oh. Yes.
I'm David Beckman from the U.S. I think it's important for this forum, as it reports out basic findings, to reaffirm the commitment that last year's forum made to support for this new global institution, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. It was President Lula's proposal last year, and there's a real risk that it may be mentioned in a perfunctory way this year, but that the G20 won't be consistent. You know, there's a risk, because you have the changing chairmanships, that the G20 won't have a position that adds momentum to the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Partly it's an advocacy network that works in international fora, and then it's also an operational mechanism to support governments in scaling up successful programs to the national level. So rather than a lot of little food projects, if a government has had success, or the neighboring country has had success at something like conditional cash transfer as a way to address hunger, they can scale it up and make it a national program. And the Alliance staff would help to advocate with its participating members, some of the MDBs, and also bilateral and NGO institutions, to bring financial and technical assistance to bear on what the government is driving. I think it's an important idea, and especially now, when some of the leading aid donors are cutting way back and aren't really interested in international development cooperation, it's important to have this new structure of international advocacy stress the importance of hungry people.
Thank you very much. Any other hands, contributions, any sharing? Here, front.
I think what David just told us is very important. As I've thought about this issue, I see two different buckets. One bucket is that financial fluctuations and other things often lead people into poverty and not the ability to have food that they can buy. There are solutions to that problem. The leader of our church was the Secretary of Agriculture in the American administration of President Eisenhower shortly after World War II. I often thought of him as politically oriented, but when he became the leader of our church, one of his initiatives was to encourage gardening and to encourage Brigham Young University, which is associated with the church, to do research in how to improve the ability of people on small lots to grow their own food. And so BYU has engaged in a lot of research projects to do that. And our humanitarian efforts right now for the church are actively involved in figuring out how to help people. In fact, one of the people who work in that department was just in Ghana and Nigeria this last week, doing research and trying to figure out what we could do to help with small producers and people who wanted to garden in their lot. So that's in one bucket. And there's a lot of things that nonprofits, churches, and others can do to help. There's another bucket that has problems that I think David is exactly right. You can teach people how to garden and how to grow crops. You can help develop crops that would be effective on small lots. You can do that all you want, but if their nation is in civil war and there's fighting and killing going on around them, people may not be able to grow their own crops, even if they try, even if they want to. And so in those circumstances, it takes something more than the efforts that a small church like mine or some of the NGOs can do. We can do things in one bucket very well. But in the bucket of how you deal with problems like Sudan and others, where war is going on around, it's hard to grow food, and those simply need the benefit and support and help from larger organizations. And so we want to do something that's helpful. I think we can help promote gardening, promote small growers, but we also have to put our voice behind efforts to get the large institutions to help where help is absolutely needed.
Thank you very much.
A very good morning to all of you. Salah Hamad is my name. I'm from the African Union Commission, based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I'm not sure how many minutes I have, but I have just a few things to share. Number one, when food is used as a political weapon. I'm saying this because in Sudan, where I came from, before 1971, our main diet used to be sorghum. So we make our food from sorghum, and then our president was invited to the White House and convinced that sorghum is only for animals, for horses and donkeys, and the alternative is wheat. And then Sudan was promised to receive free wheat flours from the US for 3 years, and we enjoyed eating bread. So the whole diet changed from the injera we used to have to bread for 3 years. It was for free. You go to any bakery and you just pay for a fraction of the prices because the flour was distributed for free. But then after 3 years, we had to buy the flour from the US until today. And then the flowers became a reason to change governments 3 times in the history of Sudan, the wheat flour. So I'm saying that what I'm trying to say here at this particular point, that in many African countries, the diet could change because of not nutrition and scientific issues, but because of political issues. And then that could also lead to conflicts and instability in that country. This is point number one. Point number two, in some of the societies and the communities, the local communities, we see that the youth are abandoning the communities and moving to larger cities. So nobody's growing food anymore. And those who are growing food, they're growing food, and once they die, no continuity. So the land The water is there, the resources are there, but there is no human beings to continue farming food. So what could be done to encourage the young generation, or at least some of the youth, to stay behind to, continue the growing of food? Last but not least, and I think this is quite important, that in many cases, there will be some food in a community, but then a neighboring community doesn't have food. So sharing, which is part of our African shared values, doesn't exist anymore. And probably also this could lead to conflict, where farmers are farming, but then the shepherd of, what they call them, the shepherd of the cattle and whatever shepherds, they enter the farms and they destroy the farms, and then that becomes also another reason for conflict. So the point I'm trying to raise from these three examples is that how can we really prevent, as religious institutions, conflict, food from being a reason for conflict? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The one issue that you raised that is very relevant to our own country is how is farming still an attractive option for young people that have big dreams of becoming successful people or going into other areas of life, and farming isn't the biggest priority there. I'm involved in one project in the Northern Cape where we link hydroponic farming with teaching of math and science in the high school, so that the food gardening project is at the same time providing for the community, which is a very low income community, very poor community, but all the senior classes in the school work in the food garden, and it's part of their math and science training of getting them interested. And it's interesting that many of the children that then complete school wants to go into agriculture because of that exposure, but it's a challenge we face also. Yes, here in front. Where's our lady with the mic?
Yeah, I think one of the maybe opportunities, but also a challenge in this global space, is that so many solutions around food are so local, or maybe they should be more local. I think some of the examples that we've seen highlighted show how when the global system starts dabbling in local food issues, sometimes it can cause unforeseen circumstances. So of course there's these global needs for advocacy for hunger in conflict situations and famine situations and famine-like situations, and we all need to advocate together for that. But I'm wondering how, one opportunity that I see is really gathering and listening to local voices and learning from those local voices. So that I think connects to the Global Alliance and how knowledge management, things like that. But one opportunity, just very concrete, is, I mentioned it, I think, in one of the sessions, but 4SD Foundation and World Vision collaborated on this platform focused on nutrition dialogues, designed to bring communities together to talk about the issues in their own community. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the barriers to nutrition? And what are some proposed solutions? And we've seen, particularly in faith community-led dialogues, really interesting ideas emerge. And I think trying to figure out, can we continue to use this platform, nutritiondialogues.org, anyone can host. There's very specific kind of process. It's really easy to do, and then you post on the site what the outcomes are. And I think it's both a resource already there, you can look and see what others are doing, but also a resource for us to think about on a global level, how do we learn, how do we leverage the things that we're learning, and even those dialogues themselves become catalysts for action, because it brings faith communities together with the local leaders, with government, with other civil society actors and NGOs, and really kind of hopefully is a catalyst for the beginning of that multi-sectoral engagement.
Thank you very much. The floor is open. You're welcome to make any contribution. Yes, the back.
One comment that I would like to make, I see that there are quite a few people that would like to help in food inequity, but oftentimes don't know how. They don't know where to go. They don't know what resources there are that they can do one-on-one. And I do think that one of the things that many of the people here work with nonprofits and work in other ways, many times they want to do hands-on. You know, everybody is asking for money, and I think that people do like to give money, but oftentimes they like to have experiences like we just had at our service project. They like to be hands-on. And so one of the things that I think we do need to do more as nonprofits is to make sure that people have the opportunity to go one-on-one into their local communities, because just about every community does have people who are in need of food. And so we need to be able to kind of get people involved more, because once they get involved, I think that the interesting thing is they enjoy it. They enjoy helping other people. It is something that brings great happiness in people's lives. And so I think we need to spread the happiness and see what we can do to be able to get more people involved in this issue.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? You must help me in this session. I can't keep you going for here in front, in the middle.
Thank you. Just to build on that point, we mustn't underestimate the power of happiness and joy. We were talking about emotional health and mental health. And when people are depressed and food deprived and struggling financially, economically, and the stresses that puts on mental health, in the Baha'i faith there is a quote from Abdul Baha, and I'll have to paraphrase it, but Baha'u'llah's son explains that the remedy for sadness is of being of service to somebody else. So getting involved in things that bring joy and happiness and help to others is very healing for the psyche of both the person struggling and the person who is in need of being useful. So we have to see each other as collaborators, helping each other in our overall well-being, and by being of service to each other, we help provide that health for both parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. I believe that any small piece of land is gold. And the important point which I wish to raise is, how can we be able to train the impoverished communities to capitalize on the small piece of land that they have, and so that it can be able to transform into some level of food security, and where they could be doing their planting, they could be able to have access to seeds, where they can be able to nurture their loved ones, their children, towards this food security. I mean, if you look at the cost of living and the distance between the haves and the haves not, then it is one of the most sad realities that we are confronted with. I mean, we speak about hunger, we speak about food, we speak about the necessity to look at those that don't have. We have enjoyed the hospitality of the G20, and I think we can put our hands together for the wonderful way that they've taken care of us and provided to us. But added to it is the element of waste. And when we are having access to much food, then the opportunity of waste becomes prevalent. And then going back to the impoverished communities, for them, every piece of bread has a meaning. And so the point that which I wish to raise is, how can the G20, in outflowing from this particular point, translate that piece of land that is gold into productivity, And I believe that having some form of training would be important. And then for us that haves, to be thankful for what little we have. I thank you.
Thank you very much. This in the front. Well, there's another one now.
Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to contribute around the future generation. We are talking about food, but the number of young people who are not interested in the area of agriculture, they believe that the corner offices might be suiting them. It may require us to work on mind shift of some type. Coming from higher education, we have taken this to be very serious, and the only way we can get students enrolled into agricultural programs is to offer them scholarships. Otherwise, young people are not interested in paying to go and study agriculture. One of the key areas that I've seen of great interest for us we need to think about, I work with students, my university picks students from refugee camps. And with the students from refugee camps, and we implore them that they must be enrolled into agriculture. If they are not taking agriculture and natural resources, then they will take agriculture and climate change, they will take agriculture and something else. Why? Because we have noted that some of these students, when they are studying the next 4 years or so, we pay for them to go back to their refugee camps, and they begin the small clubs of growing vegetables, growing things while they're in the refugee camp. I think we have to be very intentional what kind of skills we wish to pass to the generation of the future to safeguard on food production and food consumption.
Thank you very much. There's another hand here.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I come from a community where there's a lot of poverty, and people need food now. They've got nothing. People come to us, they haven't eaten for 2 or 3 days. And I think it's important that we also remember the dignity of our people. So sometimes people who donate to us, they want us to take pictures of these people. And again, that's another form of abuse, I think. I know you give money, we have to be responsible and have proof, but the way that we do it, we say to those who donate, come to the project and meet the people. So we tell the people, this is the person who has donated this food or the money for the food, so that we can create a living for some people, just to eat. The second thing is, what we do is because we don't have land, we plant herbs. So our members plant, like for me, for instance, I plant, what is Russisch now here? Chilies, yeah. I plant chilies. Sorry, this is not my first language, so I have to find out words from people who know. So, and somebody else might plant rosemary, and spinach is the thing that grows, so we always have lots of spinach. But we can plant it into pot plants, and that's what we do with our members. We just plant and then we share it, and then we prepare the food. Then we are also in partnership with another NGO, just next door to us, who also gives food to the people. So what we do is, we share with them, because they've got a piece of land that they have received, and so they plant sweet potatoes and all of these things, and carrots, and so they share with us. And what we have found also is in our community, when we dish out food, because as I said, people are really hungry, what happens is, in the beginning this happened, we would dish out food, and then they would dish out food, and another group would dish out food on the same day, and we see the food in the road. So even people who have nothing, they also end up wasting. And so we started talking to each other. So we will give on a Monday, you will give on a Tuesday, and we will give on a Thursday. And so people will have food every day. So what I'm saying is networking is also very important. So there are these kind of ways. So we are saying, yes, this is important. We are talking about the G20. We're going to speak to those people out there. But also when we speak to them, we must remember the dignity of our people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for this very practical example at the back on the left.
Thank you. My name is Des Fransman. I'm from Kimberley, South Africa. And I think maybe the example you made is maybe closer to home there in the Northern Cape, where you guys are busy. I am also part of an NPC, Creating Hope Africa, where we are trying to change the narrative from handouts to hands-on. Because your handouts, they're not sustainable. No matter what you do, you can always try and give food, but it's not sustainable, 1, 2. It is also more appreciated if you have grown the food yourself. So maybe we should look at, from an interfaith perspective, look at the different religions. I mean, if you take Islam, if you take Christianity, all religions, Jewish, we all have this one singular thing in all our Bibles, Quran, and so on. It's about giving food to those that are hungry. That's a common golden thread you will find through all of the religions. So maybe we should stop being fragmented in our approach in serving one community, but from an interfaith perspective, put all our efforts together, and maybe in the churches, the yards of the churches, the mosques, the temples, have community food gardens where we have community, no matter from which faith you are, to come and work in that garden, and by so doing, you know, have that dignity that you're working for what you have. But I would like to submit that handouts are not sustainable, and we need to find another way of getting our people to be hands-on. And I know this will be a big mind or paradigm shift, a cultural shift maybe, but we need to get to, I don't know how we're going to cross that Rubicon to get people from living from handouts to being hands-on in their approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In Cape Town, Greater Cape Town area, there are quite a good network of community food gardens that support different community kitchens. And all research show that there's an increasing number of people that depend on that for their basic needs. So if you can have practical examples of having public spaces, even that could be shared for safe food gardens. One of the problems we have in Katu and Olifantshoek is that these gardens are being vandalized. So security and crime is a big challenge. So that we try now to reshape it, that we don't support food gardens unless the safety is sorted out first. It's just too costly if everything is vandalized. But isn't it, for South Africa at least, a challenge that local municipalities should allocate a portion of municipal land in the center for a community garden? I know in a place like Grootbrak, that's the case where people do organic farming. And the whole community buy from there because they want to buy organic food and veggies. So, but if this can be a joint venture of different faith groups, it will be even more effective. Just on sharing on this side.
Thank you very much. I wanted to submit 2 or 3 things. One, as this Interfaith Forum, one of the appeals that we should make to the religious community is to make land available, because churches and mosques in many areas own big piece of land, especially in the rural areas, that can be used as a quick fix in the issue of food security. And that also will talk to the social cohesion at the same time. Secondly, we also need to, the issue of security and crime in the communities. Because one of the things that we are promoting currently is one household, one food garden at the back, whether you have land or not. There are so many systems and ways that people do to plant or grow their own food now. But the problem we have with the security and the bylaws of the municipalities is that they are selective when it comes to enforcing the bylaws in terms of security. You will find that the bylaws that are implemented or enforced in the city are different in Kwalanga, next door from here. I mean, 10 minutes from here, the issue of security. Thirdly, the involvement of young people in the issue of food security is vital. Many people here from South Africa will agree with me when I say in school or in their schooling days, agriculture was used as some sort of punishment, especially for boys. If you are late coming to school, your punishment is to go and do gardening. And that created a bit of a negative relationship between young men and agriculture. And it was a psychological thing. So I'm saying this because I'm seeing a shift in the Eastern Cape here in South Africa, where young people are showing interest in agriculture and are coming back in numbers. Whatever profession they have studied, be it medicine, law, some are artists in the entertainment industry, but the shift to agriculture, one, as a source of income, two, also addressing the issue of food security. But the question is, how do we then make sure that is sustainable in terms of opening markets and ownership? So my appeal to this forum is, this discussion should go to the ordinary man. What is food security for the ordinary man in the street? What does it mean? And how do we involve communities in terms of ownership? Because out there, people are saying, it's this platform's responsibility when we talk of food security, not knowing that whatever happens across the world, the war in Russia, the war in Burundi affects us here in South Africa. So such conversation, what I'm trying to put here is such conversation should also be interpreted for an ordinary person walking in the street so that they can understand and take ownership when we talk of food security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes.
In vulnerable communities, I'm not talking about a recommendation to G20, but to us as interfaith or leaders of various churches and communities, I think we just have to encourage, like the models that we are having these days in communities, we are empowering the local leaderships in communities because we believe with the Ubuntu that a person belongs to the community. So for those with lack of food security, what the community does is to mobilize their energies. They are given a piece of land, and then they all come once a week to plow and to sow whatever seeds. And then end of day, when harvest time comes, we have a granary for those who lack for food. So it's a model that many people, in particular vulnerable communities, can adopt so that we can have food for our poor people in various communities. But however, giving recommendation for G20, we are saying inequality still remains the thing to be addressed. Sustainability still have to be addressed, and policy has to be addressed, that there is equal distribution for everyone, because the basket is enough for us all. But we don't have, even for those in African countries who would like to take up agriculture, we do not have the capacity. We need training. We do not have the equipment. We need to be given. So what is important is to address the inequality in distribution of resources so that we can make ends meet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got to notice that our time is up, but as chair, I have the power to override this. So I'll give Bishop Sepuka and this lady in front here, if you can give the mic to them, that we still have those two contributions. Of course, any one of you is welcome to send us a note per email or whatever to be shared after this session.
I hope this has not been said before I came in. I think the other thing that we need to consider in food security is to secure a little market, for people to be able to sell their products so that they can buy other things that they are not able to produce. Where I come from in the Eastern Cape, it is sad to see things being bought from Natal, that could be sourced, locally from the small communities. So we also need to look at that as well.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you so much, Doc. I don't know if this has been mentioned, but how about food security in universities? I've seen young people in universities starving, and young girls end up selling their bodies. And then Global Fund would come and say, we have a sex work program. I don't know if there is any mother who sent her daughter to a university of sex work, since our government is have those interventions for sex work. Yet young girls are becoming sex workers because they are starving on campuses. And secondly, I don't know if this has been mentioned, but we have land, and the land is still for the white elites, especially the traditional leadership land. How about having mothers doing tree farming, same like our white business owners who are owning land, planting trees for livelihoods? How about mothers and young people contributing on tree farming as well, because we have so much land? And finally, what is the accountability framework that we are coming out with out of this gathering? When are we meeting again, especially as the region, SADC, the continent, South Africa, KZN? What are the time frames? When are we meeting? Thank you.
Thank you so much. For those of you that didn't have a chance to give an input, you can still do that by giving us notes or sending us emails. We are on the system. Bishop, you've heard that. The ball is in your hands for the next meeting. Okay, I just want to say thank you to all of you for your participation. I think the intention is to go on after this forum and to build on where we can connect and support one another. Thank you so much.
All right, welcome back to the main ballroom. Assalamu alaikum. Bonjour. Konnichiwa. Hola. Dobra utra. I got you on that one. Once more, we want to send a special shout out to all of the sponsors and the partners that made it possible for us to have these awesome 4 days. Please give them a round of applause. And you have free reign and full authority to post whatever you want on social media, all your insights, feedbacks, highlights, please do that. If you need assistance navigating your social media, find somebody who's in my age bracket and we will promptly assist you. Another thing, this is a very important one. If you are flying out today and you stay at the Cullinan, the checkout time is 11 this morning. If you are staying at the Westin or at the AC Waterfront, checkout time is at noon. That's if you fly out of Cape Town is today. So Cullinan checkout time is 11, and then Westin and AC Waterfront checkout time is noon. Okay? And another thing, we are very much interested in your experiences and your highlights and your recommendations throughout this forum. So I am going to give you 5 minutes to promptly fill out this survey. So what you do is you take your phone, you open your camera, and you point it towards this foreign-looking alien language, and it's going to pop up a message on your screen, and you just click on it, and you fill out the survey. If you need assistance, please raise your hand. We are here for you. Samu, go and please assist Mr. Swain on the last side of your row. Yeah, that's Mr. Swain right there.
Can I make a comment while you all are doing your surveys? We're missing an elder. And so I am going to nominate, we're looking for Musimbi. She was here, but she's sort of vanished. I don't know if I want volunteers, but I think I'm going to volunteer Sister Ngozi, if she would be willing to come to the front and take the seat. She doesn't have any choice, I'm sorry.
Wisdom and guidance.
It will all become clear.
Thank you.
Are you succeeding with the survey? Yeah, just scan the QR code.
As you fill out the survey, this is the best session of the entire conference.
No, it's supposed to be Motseka. Can somebody find Professor Motseka? Is he coming? Can you find Professor Motseka? M&M is supposed to be there. No, we changed it, David. It's there, yeah. He was the one who I think is supposed to be. Anyway, can you find a distinguished elder? Yeah. Okay, we've drafted another.
All right, please take the time to complete your survey throughout the rest of today. And remember, we have your flight booking details, so if it somehow happens that we don't get your survey, you never know. I'm joking. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to put Ubuntu in action and demonstrate intergenerational collaboration. So for the first time in a very long time, we're gonna have an elders and youth inner dialogue. And as you can see, there's women, there's men, there's elders, and there's youth. So it's a pretty much balanced out panel. Over to you.
Thank you. This is going to be co-moderated by Sarah Rahim, who's with ACWE and many other hats. And what we're going to do is to speak very little, but give 10 minutes precisely, because they're airplanes, which don't wait for anybody. And we need to finish the session exactly on time. So we are going to start, and each of these pairs will have precisely 10 minutes. And Sarah and I will give them at least a leading question. Each of us will pose them. So let's start right away. So we have Rabbi Marker and Louisa Banchoff, both of them from the United States, so they face the challenges of the United States. And their topic is, what is the meaning of leadership? And how do you see leadership the same and differently? Sarah, do you want to?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Rahim. I'm on the programming team of ACWE, the global youth organization that's been embedded into this program. So excited to bring this question into an intergenerational frame. So big picture, we can see for the past decade or more, interfaith leadership has really been shifting from traditional structures to more inclusive models that include women and youth and even the non-religious. So my question to the pair is really, how has interfaith leadership evolved from your perspective, and what are lessons learned?
So over and 10 minutes precisely.
Okay, so we are going to begin by speaking about leadership. My name is Louisa Banchoff, and I work at the World Faiths Development Dialogue with Catherine Marshall. And I'll just briefly speak and then share the mic with Rabbi here. So in my work for Catherine, I do a lot of profiling of the religious landscape in the development sector. What are faith-based organizations and communities doing to address X, Y, Z, education, gender, women's issues, hunger, and et cetera. And so a lot of that profiling involves trying to figure out who is the leader, who is on the ground, who's doing the work. And of course, it does beg the question, who gets to be a leader? Who is elevated and seen as a leader? Where does that come from? You know, is that leadership earned? Is it given? And I'll just begin the conversation by saying that overwhelmingly, leaders continue to be male, continue to be older. So I think the role of women in leadership and youth is so vital that we continue to think about how are our very models of understanding leadership biased towards certain groups. I will embarrass the Catholic sisters in the room because I have done work on Catholic sisters, and even the word leader in Catholic spaces, if you say we want to bring Catholic leaders to the table, it carries an assumption with it. Well, who are the leaders in the Catholic community, right? If you're coming from the outside and you want to elevate Catholic voices, often you'll think, okay, let's talk to the bishops because they carry a certain authority. Let's talk to priests. So even using the word leader, perhaps the right word is representative, someone who is not just a given authority in their religious community, but is doing work on the ground that might be excluded if we use certain terminology. I'll just begin with that. And I know, Rabbi Marker, you have some thoughts on that as well.
Thank you very much. One of the surprising coincidences of being on an intergenerational panel is that, in fact, before today, we didn't know that I actually had worked with Louisa's grandfather during the years that I taught and was a chaplain at Brown University. So, in fact, we're manifesting intergenerational connection right here. And I think that says something. So just a couple bullet points to push us along. As Louisa made reference, there is in the literature a distinction between ascribed status and earned status. Ascribed status we understand. In the religious world, we understand ascribed status. Somebody is ordained. Somebody is a bishop. Somebody is a guru. Somebody has some sort of role that is recognized by others precisely because of its title and because of the role that it plays within the religious institution. Earned status is not necessarily identified with a formal role, but rather because of the way somebody is respected, because of the work that they do, because others on the ground see that they are people who represent them or speak for them or do things on their behalf. And it's important when we talk about leadership to recognize that both are important. The only other thing I want to say, and then turn it back to Louisa, is number one, in religious leadership, the transfer of power is more complicated than in some other sectors, precisely because ascribed status is so central to so many of the religious traditions. And so the hierarchy of decision-making very often favors the older, and younger people often have a more difficult time being respected or given those positions that you talked about. The other thing I would like to say, if we have time to talk about it, and I hope we do, is the issue of courageous leadership. It is easy often, for example, in the interreligious realm, for us to talk to people who respect us and honor us and legitimate us as the other. The more complicated kind of leadership that calls for courage is when we speak together where we don't necessarily agree, where there's deep-seated disagreements between us. How do we speak to each other? How do we speak with each other in front of populations? That's what I call courageous leadership. And I think often in the world, that's the kind of leadership that we as religious leaders need to demonstrate more, but all too often shy away from. And I'm happy to come back to that if it's appropriate.
Thank you. Speaking of courageous leadership, something that has very much struck me over the course of the past 3 days, from day one, is the willingness and the sense of duty many leaders here have felt to acknowledge failures, inadequacy in addressing, the issues of our times, the failures of religious communities, how they have maybe contributed to, for example, abuse of vulnerable people in their spaces. I think another thing that has come through is about the importance of giving up space for others to lead. That if we really are committed, not just in words, but in practice, to be courageous leaders, it also means getting out of the way sometimes to allow for younger people, for more marginalized, historically absent groups, women, to be leaders. And also I think there is a need to question what we think of as leadership values, because if we look at leaders in the world today, leadership, and I think most of us agree this is not a good thing, leadership is associated with domination and aggression. And also, something that came up in the panel on women's roles in peace building yesterday is, again, the way we think of leadership in religious spaces often doesn't allow for voices of young people, of women, to come forward. One of the panel members said, in the context of Lebanon, trying to engage more women was difficult because there was a barrier in the language. The very word for religious leader was religious man. And so, again, just thinking about how might religious men need to play a role in saying this is not the only type of leadership, and maybe seed ground for other voices, for other people to gain the skills and access the spaces to let their voices be heard. Yep.
Sure. An anecdote from early in my career that reinforces what you just heard. When I started out, is Izzy in the room? No, but you saw Izzy. You know, Izzy has long hair, and when I was his age, I looked like that. As you can see, there's been a lot of change since then. But at the time, I was a young leader, and I was, believe it or not, I was charismatic, and I had groupies, and people would follow me around everywhere. And then it was announced that I was leaving that position and going somewhere else, and it disappeared overnight, right? I had not created a community, I had created a cult of personality. And I was totally sobered by that. I realized that it was the wrong model of leadership. And so I realized that the best model of leadership is empowerment. Empowerment is not based on people following the person who has that ascribed role, but making sure that other people can exercise their own community development, the investment in what they care about. And the job as the leader is to facilitate the possibility of the community having the power on its own, whether it's a gender-based, whether it's ethnic-based, whether it's racial-based, whether it's economic-based. And so one of the key lessons I learned about leadership is not so much how to be the charismatic leader, but how to be the empowering leader.
I just want to end with one anecdote. Another term that I think is useful is the concept of servant leadership, right? Leading not for the success of yourself or even your organization, but really tapping into the needs of others in that group that you are leading. One example that's in one of the booklets you received about case studies, profiles of projects addressing hunger, was an example from the Eastern Cape. It was about a Methodist minister from a town called Goboti. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Members of his community had pooled resources for him to go study in the UK and get his bachelor's and master's in theology. Then they had raised money for him to get a PhD. But he realized that what that money could really do in his community was far more important than his own studies. So he said, let's use that money to found a community organization that helps invest in local communal agriculture. To me, that is servant leadership, and we need more of that.
Thank you both so much for modeling exactly what we're looking for. Sarah.
Thank you. So appreciate the conversation around courageous leadership and passing the mic. And I just want to say I believe this panel is an amazing example of that. So we're excited to transition to our second topic, social media and artificial intelligence. So I'm excited to introduce Professor Rosalind Hackett and one of our Ackway Fellows, Yassine Matrouni Launia. So just to set some context, and then I'll pass it to Catherine and our panelists. What we can see right now is that 72% of teens globally interact with artificial intelligence tools, in Africa specifically. And what we can see is that mobile use exceeds 90% in many countries, making social media a primary engagement platform, often for interfaith or peace building. So my question is targeted for Yassine, but the pair more broadly, who's addressing the digital divide in Morocco specifically, and working at the intersection of language, tech, and access. More broadly, when you think of the age of technology, do you see AI and social media as a bridge or a barrier as it relates to interfaith understanding and just the future of interfaith? And any additional context from Catherine before we pass on?
I'll add very quickly to that. How do you see it as a barrier across generations? The fact that the digital generation lives online, whereas the older generation sometimes has trouble with QR codes, as we've been hearing here. But how do you think about that and how do we bridge it? Over to you. 10 minutes precisely.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. I'm an elder who is definitely a convert to social media as an educator, as a professor, partly because I was still teaching during COVID and had to make the shift to online teaching, which I embraced, and now we sort of can't do without. So I did get very irritated by students trying to hide phones in classrooms and everything, and not, giving what I was saying, what we're doing, my full attention. So that is an area, though, that continues to bug me. But we're going to talk about what bugs us and see whether we have some overlap here in a minute about social media. But I would say also, though, as a global academic and doing research in different countries, particularly around Africa, I am absolutely amazed at how this has facilitated communication and interactivity, and within the space of 10 years. So, Yassine, how do you, as a youth, feel about social media generally? How are you how are you working on social media?
Thank you, Professor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that question. I would like to start first by, and we had a chance to discuss briefly before, and I would like to see those conversations, especially this one, more as like a representation of the alliance that can exist when it comes to social media, technology, and the digital divide as well. We all need, I think, and this is my perspective, we need your experience, your wisdom, your care, and we need our adaptability, our creativity and innovation in order to make those AI ecosystem, social media platforms and other online platforms more ethical, trying to create concrete and solid safeguards in order to move forward in a really caring way. And to your question, how do I feel about social media and how do I use them, right, on a daily basis? I'm from Morocco and France, and I have seen and I observed with my fellows Moroccan from my generation that social media was a powerful tool to express the anger, the disappointment, especially in Morocco or in France as well. We had gone through difficult periods and we wanted to be part of history as well. But we had this frustration regarding how we could possibly make our voices heard in a space that was preventing us to even access. So social media was like a good platform with different campaigns that we co-organized with our elders in both Morocco and France during different campaigns and different presidency, different social and social issues that we had to deal with. So first, I would say the blessing is clear. It is like an online platform that we cannot deny and that we need to use more with the care and the guidance of our elders in terms of wisdom. What about you, if I may ask, Professor?
Yeah, I feel that sometimes it's an addiction, right? And I worry about, in my own case, information overload or trying to remember where I saw or heard about something. So what about that? How, and the self-care and the community care, whether it's the classroom, how do you manage that? Is AI just going to, is it a different animal, or is it's just so tied into social media? How is that aspect going to improve or affect our lives so that we're becoming actually we think we're becoming more connected, but we're actually more disconnected, right? So it's like the ethics of it. Tell me how you approach the ethics of your trade.
That's a very good point, and I recall, like, during all this conversation we had during this amazing forum, sometimes you can feel a bit frustrated when you get connected to someone, or you think that you get connected to someone, and you're starting to having a conversation. And to your point about addiction, you realize that, oh, I'm just taking my phone and having a kind of conversation, not living the moment, not living the very moment. And maybe to your point, I would like to add about AI. We oftentimes regard and see AI as like a monster. We had like some amazing panel about AI. We don't know how to approach it. It's like a new creature that we get to know, and we want to approach really carefully. Just an example, I'm working with Tarjimli. I'm representing Akwe proudly, and I'm also working with Tarjimli. We are working at the intersection of language access, language justice, providing free interpretation and translation services through a mobile app we have created to LEPs, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. And we wanted ethics to be at the center of this mission. So we are using AI to improve the algorithm that will allow a good matching between an LEP and an asylum seeker or refugee with a volunteer translator. So I think we're getting there. We know a bit how to approach AI and how to approach this creator. Mm-hmm.
As a professor and religion and media, I'm really excited at some of the new research that is going on of online communities. There's some great work being done at the University of the Western Cape, where they have a strong emphasis on religion and media. And I've learned a lot about Muslim women influencers on Instagram, TikTok, etc. So I find that exciting. But have you noticed, Yassine, that a lot of people are actually looking at us and listening to us and aren't looking at their phones? I think that's really encouraging. Anyway, we've got about a minute or so left. Is there anything more you want to add? What do you think that we're sitting here as male and female? What about the gendered aspects of social media, of AI? I mean, is your world dominated by male tech guys, or I mean, I'm always attentive to that. Can you speak about the gendered aspect? I mean, in terms of the production and the reception and the use of AI and social media?
I would lie, thank you for your question, but I would lie if I said no, it is not dominated by male, and it's completely equal and balanced. But no, but like I think the most important is to talk about it. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation with this intergenerational conversation with your wisdom, your experience, and trying to continue to talk about it and trying to act on it as well. About, to your first point, I think the most important is to see like this whole ecosystem we've started to build as an alliance, as collaboration. I don't want to see it as like a divide between our elders and the youth. I think we should take the most of your experience, your pain, your learnings as well, and our creativity, innovation, and energy to build a more moral and ethical online platform. And AI systems do not have morals, but human beings do. And I think we should keep that in mind when we work towards more ethical digital and technology. Yeah.
But there's been a strong emphasis in this meeting on vulnerable communities. How is this, these new media, how are they accessible? I mean, is it via the cheap phones, the cheap Chinese phones? I mean, that's how many of the people I know in villages actually got their first phones, but thanks to a certain Chinese company. But I mean, what about the outreach? How do we reach those who may need, I mean, is it via satellites? I mean, is it kind of local and very global? I mean, can you say something about the vulnerable communities?
Yes, when I can relate when it comes to the work we're doing at Tarjimli, maybe quickly we need to stop here about UX. I think UX and designing products and technology with care and empathy and compassion is also really important when we design those technology. So maybe like partly answering your question, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, warm thanks and congratulations to both of you. The next topic that we're focusing on is one of the many elephants in our room, which is the challenges of climate change and the ways that they affect different generations. There has been just a little bit of sort of movement in who's sitting at the table, and I was actually admonished this morning that I should not listen to rumors. But I'll let you introduce yourself. And I also introduce Grace Chilongo. But I think the question that we want to ask you is, who should be deciding and how on issues that so profoundly affect the next generations, including you, all of us, but also our grandchildren? And how do we take the different impact on different generations of the climate phenomena into account? Sarah?
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I'll just quickly add, as we're seeing, faith communities are mobilizing as it relates to environmental action and justice. And to contextualize it a little bit, Africa contributes less than 4% of global emissions, yet they face severe impacts, such as drought in the Horn, floods in West Africa, and rising food insecurity across the continent. So I'm excited to kind of pose my question first to Grace, and then to open it up to the pair. Grace, who's an environmental scientist and youth leader from Malawi, if you could just share a bit more about your work in environmental justice, environmental action, and just specifically the role of young people, as Catherine has mentioned, in really paving the way here. So we'll pass over the mics.
Wow, interesting. The issues of environment. Yeah, so I'll be speaking with my reverend here. And to be honest, when we talk about the issues of major environmental crisis, we are referring to the issues of climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution. But when we look carefully, the impacts that we are suffering today, they are caused by those people who lived 100 centuries ago. Because looking at the issues of, for example, carbon emissions, carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide that was polluted 10 years, 100 years ago is still impacting us today. And you can agree with me that all of us here, we have been, in one way or another, we have been impacted by the climate change, by floods or by droughts. And the most vulnerable group of people, they are the ones suffering. We're talking about those people who are in local communities, of which the soil of a tree has been washed away. We're talking about those people living in cities, whereby they're experiencing pollution in the city due to the emissions. We're talking about those women, especially in my own country, where men tend to leave our own country and come to South Africa, we're leaving women behind. They are the ones suffering. But us as the youth right now, I'll speak to myself, of course, me as a youth, we don't want to deal with these issues alone. We need the older generation to be with us. We need us youth to be involved in everything that is being done. When you talk about even the implementation on the ground, we are on the forefront to implement. We need the older generation to help us in terms of finances so that we can implement our grassroots action on the ground. What do you think about this, Sam?
Yeah. Sitting next to you is quite intimidating. Let me start where I belong first. I belong in a generation that used to conceptualize and making things to happen. I will go back to around 1987 when the General Secretary of the United Nations, Perez de Cuellar, made a statement that
People in all regions of the world are joined in a common desire for a peaceful and secured existence. And in order for that to happen, there's a time in my life when I was the mayor of the city of Mfuleni, and I wanted to criminalize the act of littering. And I have to think twice before I delivered that report to council to say, no, maybe I need to change the approach and come with an approach where we should talk about the civilian conservation corps. So you can't say the elders should come with a solution. In this country, we give young people around 250. It's going up every financial year. And I keep asking myself, why do we give them money when they can't do any work? So as a South African, I would really want to say to my president in the SACC, we really have to push maybe the next conference to say, and Reverend Moss, this money that we give to young people who are unemployed, they should work for it. They should go and clean the parks. They should go and clean the streets. We should bring the project of Litsima that was introduced by President Mbeki to say society should work and keep the environment clean.
Yeah, we have to work. I thank you so much for that point. But I also want to add the issues of even in the social media. In addition for us to work, we also wanted even the inclusion of our climate solutions must also be combining with the modern technologies together with the indigenous knowledge. We want the combination of these two to come together.
Absolutely. In my life, because I think I'm older than you,
Mm-hmm.
I was once attempted to jump into a sea, the Black Sea. I was visiting the Scandinavian countries, and I wanted to swim, and they told me, please don't do that. The sea is dirty. And I went to Germany. I wanted to swim, and they told me, you can't swim in this river. It is polluted. So technology itself is problematic if it's not properly managed. So we will need actually that government should put strict regulation in terms of technology. It's good and it's bad at the same time. So when you look at the rivers today, our planets actually are polluted because of dumping. Where I'm coming from, I've got the Val River. I'm struggling. I struggle to clean that river as the mayor. I struggled because companies actually are littering that river. But at the end, they say the municipality is failing to clean that river. And how can I clean the river? That is actually saving about 15 municipalities. Companies downstream, they are pouring whatever they get, they produce from the industry. And then because there are no stringent rules to say you cannot dump what you are producing into the rivers. So our education system, it is not good enough to teach young people even today that littering is a sin. So we really want to inculcate in our curriculum the whole concept of littering and environment justice. What are you saying about it?
That's totally true. That's actually totally true. You can do it alone. You cannot manage. But then, I would also bring in the concept of Ubuntu in action. That's why we need both you as the elders, everyone on the board, including even the younger generation to help you. Because we as a youth, we are so energetic. Yeah. We are so energetic and we can bring a lot to the table, but we cannot do this alone. We also need you on the table.
Of course, we need opinion makers to be involved, and like yourself. Mm-hmm. In this country, we help young people to have bread on the table, but it's for free. That's a problem. So therefore, that's why I was asking about civilians who can come and be assigned instead of be given grants for free, but they are given this money and working for it. Mm-hmm. Lastly is the issue of moral communities. A clean environment shapes the morality of society. When you look around in our townships, people destroy whatever they have. The little they have, they destroy it. They burn facilities and so on. So we need to inculcate in the mind of our young children from home. I feel so bad when I see my next door neighbor not cleaning their yards.
That's very bad.
And then these are sometimes young people who just throw things around.
We are going to change. Yeah, you are totally right. And my faith also tells me that you teach a child at a young age, and he will never going to live that path. So you are totally right when you say we should be teaching our young people at a very right, and that's totally true.
Of course, care for the planet begins with one's own front yard. So we cannot talk of something big there. Let's start in our yards.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. I totally agree with you on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We are moving on to our final paired conversation, focused on the topic of education reform. So I'll start with some stats and then pass it over for comments. 85% of students globally say that it's important for schools to be accepting and open to religious and cultural diversity. And we also know that by the year 2050, Africa will host 1/3 of the world's youth. And we know that education reform is critical for shaping future interfaith leaders. So I'd like to pose my final question to Salim, an Akwe Fellow from Kenya, who's a values-driven peace-building and education expert. So Salim, as you think about the future of Africa's educational system, this is a big question, how can we prepare to really engage young people, and what skill building is needed to equip them to just address the global changing modern world?
And I will put a question to both of you, Sister Ngozi and Salim. We heard impassioned discussions here about the problem of conveying values and restoring an ethos and ethics within the society. How can education do that better? And are there different perspectives when you look at different generations?
Thank you so much for that question. Sister Francisca, do you want to start, or you want the young generation to start?
I think I would like the young generation to start because, first of all, I walked into this hall. I was just trying to sit down, and I was called up. And I was made to sit down beside you, a youth, which means, Catherine, thank you for acknowledging me as an elder, which I am. I'm very grateful for that. Makes me feel happy. So you can start.
Great. I think that is one of the ways in which we want to start instilling those kind of values. And my work in Kenya as a peace-building expert and educator is working daily with children, schools, and religious leaders and parents. Because when we talk about values in the education, and in education, we cannot talk about it without talking about safety. So values can't exist in an unsafe environment. And so it's very important to be able to create inclusive and safe classroom environment, and not just for children, but also for those who work with children, and not just for elementary and secondary, but across the board. And so one of the things that we are doing as an organization, because I run an organization that is a peace-building organization, is peace education in primary schools and secondary schools. And some of the values that we teach is on respect, for example, and love and forgiveness, because most of the adults we see today, they were children. Not even most, all adults we see today, they were children. Yes, they were children. And most of the people that we see even causing violence in their communities, let's imagine this way, if they were trained on respect and some values, they will respect, they will understand that, violence is wrong. And those are some of the things that we need. And also, we should not just teach values as slogans. We should live these values. We should do these values. And I'll give you a typical example. And so when we started our program, and in the rural communities in Kenya, we recruit kids into the peace labs. And so there was this certain young boy who, according to the report from the school, he was very violent, he was, all over, and they had an issue with a fellow student. And so when he came into the program after a few months, he started reaching out to the student that he was fighting. And he started telling them, at the Peace Lab, this is what we have been learning. And I want, because I see you as a brother, I see you as my fellow student, and I want to be able to grow with you. I'm not sure if that's how you are taught as you are growing up, and I would like to know, or you carried your father's, or your parents' hatred, and you started hating other children because your parents hate each other or something. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I am very glad to hear us talk about values and morals. We live in a generation that even parents don't see the need to teach the children values. And when we talk of education, it has to start from the home. Parents, mothers, fathers are the first teachers of the child before that child steps out into the society. But what we see today is that most parents are even afraid to teach their children the right values and morals because they say, no, that's not what is happening in our society. Think of the generation they belong to. What generation are we talking about? When we talk about education, I want us to go back. I always like to talk about Africa and Nigeria, my home, because that's where I grew up. The other education I got from the Western world and things are secondary for me. The main values I got were from my parents, from home. And I remember growing up when after dinner, our parents will call us and tell us those stories, tales by moonlight, and those were very educational. They helped the children to grow. But now what we see is that the internet, the phone, takes time. Most of the time, parents don't even sit down to have good conversation with their children. So I'm glad to hear that you are teaching this in your organization. So if we go out and make it a point of duty that this is what we want to do, don't forget that education now, there are many people who live in the communities, rural communities, who can never, who is the MC, I told him today, I said, well, you have done all this, your stuff, but remember that there are some of us who don't belong to your generation, so you have to teach us. And that's where the challenge is, that many of our mothers, many of our fathers, even children, if you go to the communities, the grassroots communities, you find out that these children don't understand what we are doing. Gone are the days when children go to school and they come back with homework and they sit with their parents and they have to do writing, they have to read, they have to understand. Now everything is on the phone. So what time do we as parents and children sit down to interact and learn the lessons of the past that will help us for the future?
Yeah. And I think Catherine saw the wisdom, that you have, because we struggle with that a lot in terms of the kind of parents that we work with, for example. And because looking at where I come from, most of the education system, and it's in Africa, and you're talking about, we have it, we bring it home. It's about passing exams, and it's not about being a holistic human being. And that becomes quite a problem because you can imagine in Africa, every year, there are graduates who are going, there are students who are graduating every year. And these students, they are even supposed to, vote. And some of them don't even understand why they vote, and they will just vote for the sake of it. And I think it's also very critical that the values, the citizenship, because when I think it was, because I was born when my president, I think was the second president, was just finishing, President Moi. And some of the values that I learned from at that time and is kind of loyalty pledge. Although it was so colonial to do the loyalty pledge because we are, you are pledging our loyalty to the president. But imagine if we do loyalty pledge on citizenship, like, I'm an African, I'm Kenyan, and all those kind of things. And today we have the East African anthem and the African Union anthem. How then do you see that from your point, you working with women and youth, that we need to instill that in terms of young people understanding, and also the new generation, Generation Z, that is just taking over everything?
Well, one of the things I would want to point out is that we are talking about the future, but we already have youth like you.
I'm the current.
Yes,
yes,
they're in the current.
Yes.
So it's you who have to begin to pass on these values and this education we are talking about. Because if you don't do that and get it right, then it means that you don't have anything to build on.
But we also, the old generation is not moving. Like, they are stuck. There are people I've known since I was born. They are still working in government. They are still in the education sector. They are still in all these spaces. They are not leaving that space for us.
Well, if you say they are not leaving the space for you, I think there are government policies. But no, there are government policies. If you say people you know, I think the retirement age is 60 or 65, as the case may be. And if people begin to falsify age, then you blame them. That's where accountability comes in. If you are 60 and you are due to retire and make room for the next generation. Let the youth come on board, mentor them. If you don't begin to mentor them early, then they cannot get the right values that we need for tomorrow. That's what I believe in. If we don't mentor them early enough, then they don't. So please, if you know those who are due, who have stayed, and you think they are even 70, that does not only belong to those in government. What of our presidents? What of our presidents? Because there are many presidents in our African continent who are old, who cannot think, who cannot do anything, but they are still there. And people, let us look at it, because it is also the government. I don't want to, if you think of Cameroon, for example, it is France that is backing that man up, and he cannot do anything. So why will he be there? Can't we challenge these systems? So those are the issues that we need to look. It's education. Educate our people to know that this is the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to close by, and thank you, sister. And I think you raised very important points. And I'd like to close by saying, even as we talk about values, and our young people in this room, there is importance of intergenerational dialogue and to understand what worked and what did not work. Because when we just say that we need our space or we need this without acknowledging some of the strengths from the old generation and trying to be able to read and redesign our spaces, it becomes very important. And also those in the education sector and government, we need to measure this kind of values. Like I said, it should not just be a slogan. We need to have an assessment rubric in terms of understanding what has changed since we started implementing this program. Now, 1 year down the line, what has changed in terms of the behavior of the students and the teachers and also the parents? They should not just leave their children at school. Like you said, they need to be part of this development so that we have an inclusive society where every child feels that they are safe, but also they are respected as who they are, not because they are the future leaders, but because they are respected of who they are as children, as youth, and young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'd like to quickly wrap us up as we reflect on this intergenerational conversation on leadership, technology, environment, and education. And when I think of my takeaway or my wrap-up, I'd like to issue a call to action to all of you in the audience. I think it's a privilege to be here as a youth, and I'd like to also challenge the way that we use that word and think about that word, because I'd like to acknowledge that we are also leaders with expertise in the field. So I'd like for us to think about the role that we play in shaping the future agenda, and not just having space to offer our opinion, but really be an agenda setter from the beginning, and acknowledging folks on this space who have spent, a decade plus building coalitions, doing the grassroots work to be able to shape the conversation. So just a big thank you to those on the stage as well.
Well, a warm thanks to Sarah, my co-moderator, and to Akwe for helping us to put this together. I have to thank each one of these pairs. I think you've given us a model and an inspiration and a lot of ideas. And I particularly thank the draftees because I knew you could do it. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I think we're done.
I just loved that. Did you not just enjoy that panel discussion? A round of applause again, please. I'm sure many of you have noticed a lot of the comments for the youth were saying that we want to work with the older generation. And the Reverend mentioned that as long as we're willing to be on the ground to clean up and work, that we would be given the money. So as Akwe Fellows, I know without a doubt that we will work, but we ask that you give us your money. We will now move on to the closing plenary. We have had a pleasant past couple of days where a lot of important discussions have been shared. I hope that as we reflect on everything that we have learned, that we not only remain here, but we take it back to us in our communities and implement it and continue to advocate and practice Ubuntu in action, because that's what it is. It's not a philosophy. It is an act and a way of living. Our closing plenary will cover conclusions and paths forward. And I'd like to call upon our speakers, which is Luka David Musoma, who's a former Deputy Vice Chancellor at University of South Africa, and Mr. Hanif Ibrahim Hendricks, who's a Deputy Minister of Social Development. And I believe we're ready.
We are very grateful that we have had a very profound engagement, and we have learned a lot since we arrived here on Monday. We are now drawing this conference to a close. And in doing so, I would like to invite Professor Manaraj to introduce the Deputy Minister.
Friends, it's indeed a privilege for me to be able to introduce the Deputy Minister for Social Development in our South African cabinet. And I must say, I think I harassed the Deputy Minister a few days ago, but he's such a wonderful and humble man, and he was prepared to come and grace us with his presence. He has been flying, I don't know how many trips in this week throughout the country because of the different engagements that he has. And for him to honor us with his presence, Deputy Minister, we are very, very grateful to you. By way of introduction, Deputy Minister, His Excellency Mohammed Hanif Ibrahim Hendricks, he was born and raised in District 6, and currently is a leader of the Al Jamaa Party. a Muslim political party that founded along others, was part of the founding of this party in 2007. And after the party was established, he and his team worked towards gaining political posts as councillors. And in this city of Cape Town, the party appointed him as one of the official councillors. So during Honourable Hendrik's term as MP, and that is from April 2019 to May 2024, he was active on a variety of portfolio committees on different fronts. Via these, he extended the party's footprints throughout South Africa. He made sure that the party was set up with rural projects such as the one in Pameni village in the Eastern Cape, and the peanut butter factory in Gradville in KZN. Recently, he served as the Eastern Cape's Kofi Mvaba under his leadership as a deputy minister, ensuring that ministry and social development took charge. In South Africa's 2024 national elections, the party succeeded to gain a seat in the parliament as an MP, and since that he has retained that seat, he was approached by the president to become the Deputy Minister of Social Development in 2024. My goodness, I'm also getting old now. The idea, of course, appealed to him, and he accepted the post in the newly formed Government of National Unity, or the coalition government, and he serves currently in that position. And since his official appointment as the Deputy Minister, I strongly believe that he demonstrated his ability to, among others, oversee projects such as the development in the Eastern Cape's Kofi Mvaba outreach program, the United Nations Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund that took place in Cape Town, and the Deputy Minister was inducted as the key patron for the National Men's Forum, and he has been initiating many new projects that plan to benefit various sectors of our community, especially the marginalized and disabled and poor. The Honourable Deputy Minister, you're very welcome, and thank you for gracing us with your presence, and we therefore afford you the opportunity to address us this morning.
Allow me to give the traditional greeting, Sanibonani. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. The G20 Interfaith Forum 2025 is supporting South Africa's G20 presidency. They did not know what they let themselves into, because they had to contend with critical issues that seem to be a threat to the G20 handover that's going to take place in November. I don't think you knew that when you decided to support South Africa's G20 presidency, that South Africa is asserting international law when the drafters are seen to have thrown international law into the waste paper basket. And here I refer to the ICJ case and other cases where South Africa approaches the International Court for Justice and Fairness and redress. You come to South Africa when inequality has gone from bad to worse, because South Africa is now regarded as the most unequal country in the world. After 30 years of democracy, there has been little recovery of stolen land by beneficiaries of the apartheid system. So you never knew that when you decided to throw your weight behind South Africa, there will be a lot of talk about expropriation with no compensation. That's expropriation of land. Addressing the harm caused by job reservation using BEE and addressing broad-based economic empowerment because of lack of economic opportunities in South Africa seems to have been some obstacles to give us a smooth ride to the handover in November. So your support during these difficult times is highly appreciated. The Rio de Janeiro Declaration emphasized the taxation of billionaires. Are there any billionaires sitting here? Especially from Brazil. I would like to know how it affected you. But the Rio de Janeiro Declaration also talked about the fight against poverty. And it was interesting that the African Union declared the year 2025 to be the year that there will be zero poverty in Africa. That hasn't been achieved. And it's interesting that you are now taking the baton and trying to achieve zero poverty and hopefully in Africa. South Africa does have zero poverty. Maybe the amount of funding that we make available in terms of social welfare grants is not as high as many people expected. But in South Africa, from the day you are born and you don't have any income, the country provides a social grant benefit until the day you die. So very quickly, when a child is born until 18, they get a child support grant, besides all the other assistance like school nutrition programs and so on. And then when children reach the age of 18, they are entitled to a NSFAS educational grant to get a degree or a diploma. And those who can't get jobs or are not accepted at university, there's a small grant available which you used to call the COVID grant, which is the forerunner of a basic income grant. So with the high tariffs that has now been imposed on South Africa, our unemployment situation has deteriorated, and there is now a demand for BIG, which is a basic income grant, because the so-called COVID grant is very small. It's only 370 rand. You're all aware of the fact that older persons get a grant, and when you're 75, over 75 like me, you get a bit extra. Look, I may be over 75, but I look younger than many of the men here. Program Director, Master of Ceremonies, Deputy Director, Professor Catherine Marshall, all members of the G20 Interfaith Association Advisory Council here present, distinguished participants of all the faith communities represented here this morning, senior officials of government and civil society organizations, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, may the grace, peace, blessings, boundless light and love be with you all. I'm indeed pleased to have received a kind invitation from the G20 Interfaith Forum's chairperson, Professor Musoma, and his two deputy leaders, Mrs. Andile Makasi and Professor Maniraj Sughavan, who pressurized me to be here this morning to address you at this conference, closing session that address a critical theme, Ubuntu in action, supporting the vulnerable communities. Now, I don't have a quarrel with using the term Ubuntu. We all embrace it. But I would like to remind you that in Africa, after most of the countries achieve uhuru or independence, Julius Nyerere said that the next step is to introduce the concept of righteousness. And that seems to complement what we know as Ubuntu. It's important that we have values such as righteousness, and I'm sure that is what the interfaith community won't have a quarrel to embrace. Supporting vulnerable communities is a theme that resonates with the Department of Social Development and which I wish to briefly comment. The presidency of South Africa, we feel that the interfaith community can play a very important role in the social challenges that we have when it comes to gender-based violence, when it comes to child pregnancies, also when it comes to many of the social ills that we are grappling with. And we have engaged, the presidency has engaged the interfaith community twice, and have now given a mandate to the Department of Social Development to strengthen the relations between government and the interfaith community. Because we have failed when it comes to addressing gender-based violence. The more we have 16 days of activism, the more men abuse women. We also have problems in a place called Hilltown, where people like President Mandela, many others had their education in a missionary. One would have imagined that Hilltown would have been a very progressive town, where so many of the revolutionaries had their education because they wanted to avoid Bantu education. They went to Hilltown to get proper education by faith leaders like many of you. So when my minister, Sisi Tolasi, went to Hilltown to address the abuse of elders I was shocked. I told her, why go so far? I think there's an International Day of Elders, abuse of elders. I was shocked to find out that in this town, let's say the symbol of our revolution, the men in that town are considered to be the worst men in the country that abuse their parents and grandparents. Let me thank Professor Cole Durham Jr. as well as his deputy Professor Catherine Marshall, whose support for this conference has been unwavering, and for having invited me to share some thoughts with the participants at the University of Pretoria's G20 Interfaith Forum planning meeting during mid-February 2025. It was very exciting for me to address you as soon as you landed in South Africa to throw your weight behind South Africa's G20 presidency. On the present occasion, let me express my gratitude on behalf of the Department of Social Development and our Minister, Sisi Tolasi, the Government of National Unity. I'm a member of the Leaders Forum of that Government of National Unity. And it is something that we spoke about when we were fighting in the trenches. In the trenches, we had resistance fighters from different political parties. We didn't have a quarrel that the African National Congress should lead us. And we felt one day, when the African National Congress leads us in government, that they should accommodate many of us in their government. That hasn't been done successfully, but the Government of National Unity is now a step in that direction. In the past, South Africa was governed by one political party, the African National Congress. And now it is governed by 10 political parties, which may go to 12. So I understand coalition politics, because there was a time in the city of Joburg that we were asked by 10 political parties to take up the mayoral parlor in Joburg. And we managed to keep that coalition of 10, 11 political parties together. And in our first year, we got a clean audit as Al-Jama, and also in the second year. And then there were the normal controversies. And now we have a mayor that has been put on terms. The Minister of Finance has threatened to withdraw funding because they're messing up the finances of the city. So the GNU is something new, and it is very surprising that the members of the GNU, when we meet as a forum, we agree on critical issues like the national dialogue, and you know the convention is being held from Friday onwards. And then some of the very people who give their support outside the Leaders Forum then criticize it and wants to sabotage it. So there's a credibility problem, and I'm asking the faith leaders, please pray for the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front, who give undertakings, and after giving the undertakings, they go back on their word. Because you cannot, as a Leaders Forum, agree on critical issues and turn your back when there's consensus that that's the way forward. The people of South Africa have acknowledged the leadership of His Excellency President Ramaphosa So we would like to thank all the delegates for having graced our beautiful city of Cape Town, the mother city, with their august presence, and this is the month of August, and dignified participation. Over the past few days, this G20 Interfaith Forum conference turned out a record crowd that passionately participated in the plenaries and breakaway sessions. As a result of each one's interactive participation, many described it as a highly successful gathering. The last session, the intergenerational session, I didn't see any intergenerational challenges because the panelists all spoke as young people. There were no of the older generation. There's a very youthful discussion which we listened to. Lest it be forgotten, this event forms part of a series of high-level engagements for South Africa's presidency of the G20 presidency since the 1st of December 2024, and the series will culminate in the G20 Leaders Summit towards the end of November 2025. And I hope that the challenges you had in throwing a weight behind South Africa will give you the strength to deal with Donald Trump when he takes over the G20. Let me add that it is the first time that South Africa's presidency hosted the series. In other words, the only African country that has presided over the series of G20 activities. Our country, under President Ramaphosa's leadership, sought to effectively use its G20 presidency platform to place onto G20 agenda the Global South and the African continent's development priorities. For this reason, the theme solidarity, equality, sustainability was consciously adopted. And our President has engaged the Minister of Social Development to find out what progress my department is making to strengthen the relationship between the interfaith sector and government, because we feel that the outcomes of this conference, and we look forward to your closeout report and the recommendations that you are going to make to help South Africa deal with the problems, for example, of gender-based violence. I hope that one of the outcomes will not be this time around to tax the millionaires after Brazil taxed the billionaires. The G20 President's elected theme, I should say, resonates with the work and contribution of several faith communities across the globe, many of which are represented at this G20 Interfaith Forum conference. The fact that our local committee convened such an important conference since Sunday the 10th of August until today the 14th of August indicates that the participant voices at this G20 Interfaith Forum were considered central to international development discourse, its global cooperation agenda, and promoting world peace. And also, I hope to stop starvation, especially where starvation is being used to win wars. From my perspective, I think that your conscious choice of the conference theme, Ubuntu in Action, supporting the vulnerable communities, ties in with the Department of Social Development's agenda that strives to serve these vulnerable communities. In this era of heightened geopolitical tension among various groups, increasing nationalism in certain nation states, and rising right-wing political activities in so-called democratic environments. These developments threaten to reverse the gains achieved through global cooperation, mutual respect among nations, and open, robust interaction. Factoring in these and other negative developments, I am of the view that faith communities such as yourself and peace movements need your critical, prayerful voices to address harmful global challenges as we have with regard to the genocide in Palestine, India's stranglehold of Jammu and Kashmir for desiring their independence, and Morocco's control over Western Sahara and the Arab Republic. I have no doubt that the few days' deliberations generated positive presentations, constructive discussions, and collective solutions on matters that affect all our vulnerable communities. I can imagine that the oral and written representation in both the plenaries and the breakaway sessions resulted in vigorous discussions between the panel presenters and the audience from the conference rapporteurs. I was informed of good discourses, among others, regarding the reduction, eradication of poverty, the brief reflections on the desperate refugee status, the tearful images of displaced persons, and the critical importance of humanitarian aid to starving, malnourished children. After many of them were minced, the rest are now being starved, and the ongoing demand to bring about gender equality. Allow me to state that in our beloved South Africa, faith communities have and continue to play a crucial role in advancing the national development agenda. At the height of COVID-19 pandemic, members of our communities have witnessed extraordinary acts of courage and love. They demonstrated acts of solidarity and support for the most vulnerable population at the time of their greatest need. And I think the interfaith communities in South Africa, all over the world, must be complimented for saving many, many lives because of their direct intervention. Today, our religious institutions may be described as resilient in undertaking valuable work in strengthening families and improving the educational offerings, sharing much-needed skills, training to empower young people, tackling the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, and providing humanitarian relief assistance in the face of the frequent natural disasters, and climate change is one of the issues that you have spent a lot of time on. I just want to speak a bit more about the need to strengthen families. And that is also one of my delegations in the Department of Social Development. We need to take example of Chief Albert Lutuli, and many of you may be following the reopening of the inquest into his murder. Chief Albert Lutuli got the Nobel Peace Prize, and he made a point of having breakfast with his family whenever he could while he was in Groundville. And when I shared that story with my deputy president in Parliament, he instructed all the male members of Parliament, whenever they're at home, to have breakfast with the family. And Chief Albert Lutuli would ask the girls, what were your challenges? Some of them were working, some of them were in high school, and some of them were busy with higher education. He had an extended family. And after listening to the challenges of especially the girls, you would ask the boys, now what are you going to do to help them? So you put fatherhood at the center of the family. At a very young age, he emphasized the importance of fatherhood. South Africa is in a dilemma at the moment. We've been promoting equality between men and women, and I don't have a quarrel with that. But as a result of promoting equality between men and women, we find that fathers started abdicating their responsibilities. Now that we have 50% women, 50% men, for example, in Parliament, we still have some work to do in business. I think we need to spend more time on fatherhood and strengthening families. Through South Africa's G20 presidency and the Department of Social Development's participation in the G20 Interfaith Forum, the aim is to harness and deepen the partnership that exists with faith communities. The partnership is meant to address development challenges confronting the global societies at large and the vulnerable communities in particular. I think at nearly every cabinet meeting, the President wants to hear from the Minister of Social Development. Are we strengthening? Is your department on behalf of government strengthening the relations between the interfaith community and government? So it's a clear mandate to my department to work closely with you. And that's why I made a special effort to be here today, looking forward to the narratives, the advice that we can get from the G20, and use that to address the challenges that we have today. Over the last 3 decades, and in partnership with faith communities, the government has transformed the lives of millions of South Africans by providing the necessities of life and creating opportunities that never existed before 1994. In truth, South Africa is still work in progress, and it is daily challenge to keep building bridges in spite of the various obstacles that the country's communities face. We continue trying to build bridges in spite of Donald Trump trying to break down these bridges. So America is an important trading partner. And instead of following the Gaddafi option, and that is too long to explain, we still stretch our hand to America to continuing business with us. Because some of the products that they import from us, they actually need. You don't cut your nose to spite your face, which is what they seem to be doing at the moment. The challenges of poverty, unemployment, landlessness, and the divisions around race, class, and gender make it difficult to arrive at a socially cohesive and united society as fast as the government wants. The journey towards a kind of society envisaged by Madiba and other forebearers of a liberation struggle is long with various challenges along the path, but if all of us look back, and I can confidently say that all of us has every reason to celebrate the obstacles that were encountered along the path. As we prepare for the national dialogue, which President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke about during his recent State of the Nation address, I hope that the G20 Interfaith Forum planning meeting and conference will lay a solid foundation for the South African faith communities to consolidate and solidify their position on matters of national interest. We appreciate the fact that you've thrown your weight behind South Africa's presidency of the G20. We now call on you, the interfaith community, not only from South Africa, but from the G20, because all of you are here from the different continents, to throw your weight behind our national convention, where 600 people will convene at the University of South Africa, guided by 75 of the best thought leaders and the best minds in the country. What a wonderful opportunity for people from all walks of life will be represented. I've seen a list of the delegates that will be attending, and there's a list of over 100 kinds of people. I always thought there can only be one, but I suddenly saw, but you know, they classified people from rural areas, from villages, captains of industry. Practically every kind of people that can imagine is now represented at the National Convention. And they are coming together to prepare an agenda that must go out to every ward in the country. South Africa has over 10,000 wards. So let me explain, those of you who don't understand our system. In the city of Joburg, you have about 120 wards. In the city of Cape Town, 110 wards. So every municipality has got a number of wards, and the tally is about 10 to 15,000. So the idea of the National Convention is to take the agenda to every ward in the country 3 times over the next 2 years. 3 times. To find out from the people in the wards, what do you have to say? What new issues do you want to raise? We have a number of professors who will put all this together, and then South Africa will have its second national convention, where we will deal with substantive issues. So the convention that is being held on Friday is to deal with procedural matters. We're not going to solve the country's problems. We're just going to sit around with our thought leaders that will guide us, such as the many thought leaders that you had at your 4-day gathering, where they guided us and assisted us, and that is what we're doing at the National Convention. So the call to action is for the interfaith community to throw their weight behind the national dialogue, the first national convention, and to create excitement for the second national convention that will take place in 2026. So many people are saying that this is all a farce, it is fake. It's a build-up to the ANC's election campaign for 2026. It's nothing like that. The country is not run by the ANC, it is run by 10 political parties in the government of national unity. And the ANC is very careful in that forum not to upset the other 9 leaders of the Leaders' Forum of the Government of National Unity. The National Dialogue will bring South Africans from all walks of life to reflect on our long journey to freedom, the progress that the country has made so far, and to define a vision for the country for the next 30 years. We're drawing up a 30-year master plan. The first 30-year master plan, which you all know as CODESA, did not work. It created a situation where South Africa became the most unequal country in the world. So we were worse off than we were during apartheid, and I know that is debatable. So CODESA provided sunset clauses, all kinds of tricks by the former oppressors, and now there's a danger that there's going to be the space for a return to apartheid. And that is clouded by efforts to create a regime change in South Africa. But what is worrying is that the foundations, the legacy foundations, Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Steve Biko, and others, have somehow or another abandoned, and I've got 1 minute left, abandoned the principles of the people they are trying to honor. It is very sad that they have done that. They should have come to the convention and sorted things out, so now we lose the advantage of the benefits of their expertise. In conclusion, I would like to once again thank the Interfaith Forum, the G20 Interfaith Forum, for throwing their weight behind South Africa in the run-up to the main event in November. And I'm sure that what you've decided here over the last 4 days will help us to conclude a very successful G20 when we hand the G20 over to Donald Trump. And I see some of you are already scratching your head. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Hendricks, for your message of enlightenment, providing, as it were, the political side of your understanding of the relationship between poverty and hunger and what government is doing to address that. Thank you also for your readiness as government to work with the interfaith sector in the country so that their work, which is very, very commendable, I think not only in South Africa but across the globe, should continue as a liberational act of the people of God generally. I now call upon the following persons to come to the fore. I start off with Bishop Supoka, who will make some inputs. From there, I'll then call the next speaker. Bishop Supoka, he was part of us here. I think he needs no introduction. He is the chairperson of the South African Council of Churches. Over to you, Bishop.
Encouraged by the invitation of the minister to be partners in constructing the social fiber of our society, and to make some recommendations to them. The first one, Minister, that I'm going to put is that please let us have our children on weekends as faith leaders. There is a phenomenon in this country where children go to school from Sunday to Sunday. They don't have time to be with families. They don't have time to do house chores. They don't have time to come to our churches and temples and synagogues so that we can form them. And there is a surprise when they turn out to be how they turn out to be. Our children have been taken away from us, and we want a share of them. Let school be done, please, Minister, from Monday to Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday during weekends. Let us also make our contribution to do what you are asking us to do. Please convey this message to the government. I'll be grateful. Mine really is to do some closing remarks. As we prepare to leave this sacred gathering, my brothers and sisters, I am reminded of the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. These 4 days in Cape Town have shown us that we Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, traditional African spiritualists, and all faith traditions represented here, we have chosen to go far together. We came to Cape Town under the banner of Ubuntu in Action, focus on vulnerable communities. Ubuntu has taught us that our humanity is interconnected. I am because you are. But this week we have discovered something profound. Ubuntu is not just a philosophy, it is a prophecy. It calls us beyond mere acknowledgement of our connectedness to active responsibility for one another's dignity. When we heard from our Indonesian colleagues about education that cultivates cross-cultural religious literacy, when our Islamic brothers and sisters spoke of justice and peace, when our Christian communities shared about serving the marginalized, when our Jewish traditions reminded us of Jubilee justice, when our Hindu and Buddhist communities spoke of compassion in action, we were not hearing different messages. We were hearing the same divine call in different sacred languages. But let me speak with honesty that our faith demands. This forum has held up a mirror to our own souls as religious leaders. And what we see is both inspiring and convicting. We have confronted uncomfortable truths about ourselves as faith leaders. Too often we claim to serve the God of the poor, while those poor view us with suspicion. Why? Because our proximity to power has sometimes made us complicit in systems that perpetuate injustice. It's easy for religious leaders to be co-opted by those in power for the benefits offered, and in exchange lose our prophetic stance to stand and be the voice of the voiceless. This sometimes results in religious leaders living in mansions while their congregants queue for food parcels. It leads into our institutions accumulating wealth while children in our communities go hungry. It leads into us religious leaders blessing policies that oppress rather than liberate, where we become part of the problem we claim to solve. It leads into some of us living very luxurious life at the expense of the very people we claim to love and to serve. Let us ask ourselves, how can we speak against the corruption in governments and corporations while ignoring the corruption in our own hearts and institutions? If we demand transparency from others, should we not model it ourselves? If we call for justice in society, should we not practice it in our faith communities first? Let me say something briefly about the 5 pillars that we explored over these days. Over these days, we have examined 5 critical areas where our faith must move from rhetoric to reality. Food security and human dignity. My wish is that we could commit ourselves not merely to feeding the hungry, but to transforming the systems that create hunger. The World Council of Churches, Caritas organizations, World Visions, Islamic Relief, LDS Charities, and countless others are already demonstrating what interfaith cooperation can achieve. As we conclude this conference and go back to our bases, let us commit to establishing food security projects in every faith community represented here, not as charity that creates dependency, but as empowerment that restores dignity. Let us commit to reviving traditional farming wisdom, establishing community gardens, and building agricultural value chains that honor both the creation and creator. Regarding economic justice and debt cancellation, my wish is that we could commit to becoming accountability partners in the Jubilee Call for debt cancellation. Let us commit to not simply advocating for debt relief, but let us also commit to guaranteeing its integrity and its good use for the benefit of the vulnerable. Through our community networks, let us aspire to establish transparent tracking systems to ensure that cancelled debt reaches the poor, not the corrupt. The Jewish notion of Jubilee restoration, our Christian community's moral authority, our Islamic community's principles of economic justice that prohibit exploitation. Together, I hope we can build an accountability covenant that ensures justice reaches those who need it most. From the powerful keynote address on education presented here, we heard how education is the greatest equalizer, with transformative potential to level the playing fields and create opportunities for all, perfectly embodying the themes of solidarity, equality, and sustainability that have guided this G20 Interfaith Forum. Quality education and religious education can serve as means to cultivate cross-cultural religious literacy and eliminate attitudes and behaviors which include hostility towards people of other faiths. As we part, my wish is that we could commit to transforming our educational approaches. Let us commit to establishing interfaith educational partnership that teach not literacy and numeracy, but social, emotional, and spiritual intelligence. Through cross-cultural religious literacy, may we be able to help end the devastating wars fought in the name of religion that humiliate, brutalize, and kill children and the elderly. May our madrasas, our church schools, our temple institutions, our community centers become laboratories of Ubuntu, places where children learn that difference
is not division, but a tapestry of diversity created by the pleasure and joy of divine design. About migration and human dignity, I want to note that fear of migrants and refugees affects politics in many settings and calls for religious advocacy for compassion and care. My hope is that as we part, we could commit to being practical sanctuaries of hope for migrants and refugees. May our mosques, churches, temples, and synagogues open not just our doors, but our communities to those fleeing violence and seeking opportunity. Regarding climate justice and creation care, I invite us to commit to the treatment of creation with care as a sacred duty. The world's future requires a vision of development that can be sustained in the long run. My wish is that our faith communities could become models of sustainable living, champions of renewable energy, and prophetic voices for environmental justice. Pope Francis, of happy memories, called religious leaders to have, and I quote, the smell of the sheep they claim to pastor. Not to smell differently from the people they claim to care for, but to live so close to those we serve that their struggles become our struggles, their hopes become our hopes. This is not just a Christian calling, it is the essence of all authentic spirituality. My wish is that we could commit to pastoral proximity over political comfort. Let us commit to spending more time in informal settlements than in government offices, more time with the unemployed than with the employed elite, more time listening to the cries of the poor than to the promises of the politicians. When we speak, may we speak not as outsiders looking in, but as insiders looking up, from the perspective of those whose dignity is daily denied, whose hopes are daily deferred, whose humanity is daily diminished. Let me be clear about what distinguishes this moment from countless other gatherings. We have not gathered here to issue another statement calling on the governments, calling on the business and corporations, and calling on politicians to act. The poor are tired of our calls. The poor are hungry for our commitment. My hope is that as interfaith leaders, we could commit ourselves to action. My wish is that every faith community represented here could take the initiative, not waiting for perfect conditions, not depending on external funding, but beginning where we are with what we have for whom we serve. Rather than setting rigid timelines that may become empty promises, let each of us return home and begin. Some may act immediately, others may need time for consultation and planning. What matters is not the speed of our response, but the sincerity of our commitment. Instead of a universal deadline, let us each ask, what is the first step my community can take? What can we begin? How will we measure our faithfulness, not just a success? So to my fellow Christians, Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them. The world is watching our fruits, not just listening to our words. To our Muslim brothers and sisters, the Quran reminds us that faith without righteous action is incomplete. Our actions must reflect our submission to Allah's justice. To our Jewish friends, the tradition of Tikkun Olam repairing the world, and the ancient notion of Jubilee restoration call us to righteous action that restores justice. To our Hindu and Buddhist colleagues, the principle of Dharma calls us to righteous action that upholds cosmic order. To our traditional African spiritualists, our ancestors judge us not by what we promise, but by what we preserve for future generations. To all of us, the vulnerable communities we claim to serve are not objects of our charity, they are the measure of our authenticity. And so as we leave Cape Town, my hope is that we could live not as individual faith traditions returning to separate spheres, but as an Ubuntu coalition aspiring to shared action. Let us say we will sign with our lives, not just our signatures, a covenant that calls us to transparency in our own institutions before demanding it from others, service to the marginalized as the measure of our spiritual maturity, accountability to each other as guardians of this sacred trust, prophetic courage to speak truth to all powers, including religious power, practical action that transforms systems, not just symptoms. The children of the global south, the poor of this world, the marginalized of every nation are not waiting for our next conference. They are waiting for our conversion. From talkers to doers, from advocates to agents, from religious leaders to radical servants. Ubuntu teaches us that we are because others are. Today we commit to ensuring that others can be because we have been. Not because we spoke beautifully about their plight, but because we acted boldly for their liberation. When the history of this moment is written, may it record not what the G20 Interfaith Forum called for, but what it committed to. Not the eloquence of our speeches, but the faithfulness of our service. The God of all faiths, known by many names, but recognized by one love, has called us not to be successful, but to be faithful. Not to be applauded, but to be authentic. Not to be comfortable, but to be converted. May we leave Cape Town not as we came, as separate traditions with good intentions, but as we must go, as one interfaith family with sacred commitments, carrying the smell of the sheep, bearing the burden of the broken, embodying the hope of the hopeless. The world is waiting, the poor are watching, God is calling. Let us act because we are, and others shall be, not because we have called, but because we have acted. Amen, inshallah, shalom, om, asante sana.
Thank you. Another round of applause. This is more than just a speech. This is more than a speech. It prickles our consciousness and it questions our commitment, whether what we do is in the best interest of what we say we want to do. Bishop, thank you so much. for such profound eloquence. And your use of adjectives was so spot on. Are we capable of being transformed to become the vessels that God can use to create His kingdom on earth, using our diverse faiths? Thank you so much, Bishop. Much appreciated. Now, let me invite Whitney Clayton, the Executive Director of the Interfaith. Yeah, he's going to. Oh, okay, sorry. Let me call Lilia Casanova.
Thank you so much. I'm standing here with a heart full of gratitude and deep sense of connection. We are meeting at a time when the world feels like it's on fire. And I don't mean just the headlines. I mean the deep fractures, the inequalities, the conflicts that have lasted far, far too long at this point. And yet, over the past few days, I witnessed something extraordinary. As part of the Ackway youth program, the IF20 program, 55 young people from 25 countries and 13 religious and faith traditions came together. And they came together not just to attend sessions, but to go on a journey. And over the past several days, the transformation was incredible. We built a community, we built trust, we found courage. And most importantly, we're leaving with the motivation to act. We began with a full-day program on Sunday, right before the main forum has started, and the transformation was clear. I hope you saw all the young people in the sessions. Young people are standing taller, speaking louder day by day, and dreaming bolder. This was our goal, and I think it is a reality now. Most importantly, we planted seeds for future action that will live beyond this forum. Last night at our closing event, we had 10 young people to pitch the ideas of the grassroots interfaith action that they will take back in their communities. Whether it's an opening a soup kitchen in the Cape Town interfaith initiative, whether it's organizing an interfaith poetry jam, or skills workshop for the other young people who are struggling these days. And I would like to say a big thank you for people who made this possible. This year, this is an extraordinary year with the amount of youth participation. I would like to say thank you to Sandy Limakasi and the whole local organizing team for welcoming us with such generosity and care. I'd like to say thank you to Professor Cole Durham and Professor Catherine Marshall, to the whole IF20 team. Also, thank you for opening up the space. This year, there were at least 13 young professionals speaking at the side panels. We all witnessed the intergenerational panel, so I beg you, let's make this a tradition. Let's make this from year to year, having an intergenerational panel. Because at this point, it is clear. There is no lasting solution without intergenerational alliances. And what we've seen here is alliances among youth, but also intergenerationally. I hope you had a chance to talk to each other and among each other. To our partners and continuous supporters, and you know who you are, thank you so much for making this possible. Those organizations are the ones who believe that Ackway is not just a project, but it's a youth movement. Those who would like to support the youth participation and youth activism, come talk to us. We have a network of 300 young individuals in more than 85 countries who continue doing these interfaith activities on the ground. To the incredible Ackway team, and you know who you are, thank you so much. You pulled something unbelievable in the past month. And most importantly, to our cohort this year, thank you so much. You are unbelievable. Your energy, your expertise that you bring to the room. Thank you for reminding me what this work is all about. And just to complete briefly, I think there are 3 lessons that we're taking away from this. And I hope you agree with me, my young cohort leaders. First is that after chaos, there always comes change. And how this change looks like, it's up for us to decide. And we are at this turning point where it is time to bring change. Second, we must have courage to have difficult conversations. In spaces like this, not just among youth, but in generally, if we can't create this space here, how can we expect that from our politicians and the world leaders? Let's create a brave space starting from among the youth and IF20. And we witnessed it here, and I hope it will continue. Third, ambition means nothing without action, as I already gave you some examples. And action is easier when you remember that you're not alone. This Youth Forum and IF20, I hope, was a reminder that across continents and countries, there are people who are fighting for the same cause as you are, for dignity, for inclusion, for peace. There are so many people who are ready to walk with you, to learn from you, and stand by you. This youth program was not about building skills. This youth program was about building a community. It is about building a generation that doesn't just survive conflicts and negotiates its aftermath, but the one who creates future. A generation that prevents conflicts, whether starting in our neighborhoods, schools, communities, online, as we heard today. Because our peace is each other's peace. Our liberation is shared. This is Ubuntu, this is Ackway, this is IF20, and that's why we're doing this from year after year, and we will be continue doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. We are aware that as we enter the twilight of our life as elderly people, we are living a generation that is well formed and the character is well shaped, especially as you articulate what are the key elements that form the existence of your organization. I think they are well articulated, and we hope that the majority of our young people in the country will benefit from your efforts. Thank you so much. I now call upon Whitney Clayton, Reverend Whitney Clayton. Is he here? Okay, come over.
Four things. 1, gratitude. I had never been to South Africa before the privilege I've had of participating in planning for this event. Imagine my fortune when, in planning for the event, I get invited into a local lehotla, into an imbizo, with my brothers and sisters here locally. Prof. Masoma, my brother. Prof. Manaraj, my brother. Michael Swain, my most unexpected personal pastor. Sandile, Arsibonda. All of his team, Jackson, Walton, Bongi, the Coopers, thank you very much. Our local organizing committee, Prof. Mocheka, I love you, brother. Loved working with you. Loved meeting your family. Avase, Rainier, Sylvia, Professor Haron, thank you everyone for the privilege of working with you. To my friend Inez Adams, my dear friend, for all the work she did in preparation for this event, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Yashika, South African Broadcasting Company, thank you for what you've done to bring the attention to this and the professionalism to our message. King Bongwe, I was in the green room 2 days ago, a lovely young woman, beautiful baby, wrapped up, asleep on the couch. I walked in, it was just them. The baby started to stir. I didn't know her, but I know a beautiful baby when I see one. I like a good baby. And I said, may I bounce the baby? And she generously offered to a foreigner, sure. So I picked up the baby. I did a 20-minute meeting with our Vice Chairwoman, Catherine Marshall, bouncing the baby who fell asleep in my arms. And then I asked her, how did we find you, or how did you find us? And she said, my parents are here. I said, who's your father? And she said, the king. I said, do you mean to tell me that I'm bouncing the crown prince right now? And she said, yes. What a wonderful introduction to the warmth and the future of South Africa. Thank you. To all of our volunteers, particularly on Sandile's team, the local volunteers and the participants from Akwe, thank you. Thank you, Lilia. Thank you to our wonderful MCs, Sandile 2.0, and Judith. Thank you to our generous co-sponsors and participants, the Sterling Foundation, Islamic Relief USA, the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities, to my Muslim Council of Elder Brothers, Brother Muhammad, Brother Adama, to my future brother, Judge Muhammad Abdul Salam, who I look forward to meeting. Thank you very much. I stand and we stand in this conference on the shoulders of giants, so enormous gratitude, and one quick round of applause for our Chairman and Vice Chairwoman, Catherine Marshall and Cole Durham. Thank you. Number 2, humility. We hear you. We don't pretend to be perfect. We don't think we're perfect. We know that there are elements of the gathering that are and remain imperfect. We pledge to you our best effort, we pledge to you our sincerity, and we pledge to listen. Shortly there will be a QR code that will go up on the screen with what I think is a fairly robust exit survey. We want your feedback, we crave it. We will continue to put our best efforts into making each year's forum better and better. We've heard engagement, youth participation, leadership from our women, leadership from our traditional leaders, and a focus on results. NATO, no action, talk only, focus on results. We will be headed towards what we call the IF20 2.0, which will include greater focus on those items with the technical capital, sharing our best practices so that we can learn from each other, and the social capital, people that we can collaborate with. So number 3, my holy envy. I have seen many things in your traditions, in your faiths, in your organizations, for which I feel holy envy. Thank you for sharing with me. I ask you to consider in your holy envy that you have perhaps experienced at this event, what has moved your soul and what has touched your heart. What do you feel called to do as a result of your participation this week? Your heart will be your guide, and the call that you hear will come from your God. Follow it. So number 4, I'll do the introduction at the end. My name is Whitney Clayton. I've been in this job for 5 months. It's an honor, unspeakably, one of the honors of my lifetime, to work with you. What I have seen in the 5 months since starting has been watching God in his uniqueness and in your uniqueness, working in your lives, in your organizations, and in your projects, in your service. By observing that in you, I have had greater insight in recognizing it in myself. And to me, that is what I learned about Ubuntu in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for your vote of thanks. We feel loved, accommodated, and appreciated. I think it's a work that required team spirit, collaboration, attention to details, management, and even oversight. And we have done that as a collective local committee, as well as the international committee who work together. And that's why the product is so beautiful as a consequence of that. Thank you so much. I now call the Deputy President of the G20 Interfaith Forum, Professor Catherine Marshall, to address us.
I'm smaller than some of the other people here. I hope we're going to hear a little bit from you, Professor Masomo, because you started us off, in fact, reminding us to take a moment to remember the people who are suffering in the world, to remember the violence that's taking place, the hunger, the people who don't have opportunities. And I think that through this is on our minds. And for many of us, there are echo after echo of the words we've heard. One that still resonates for me is hearing that we're in an angry nation. And I think we're in an angry nation in the United States as well, and in other parts of the world. And it is our privilege, but also our duty and our responsibility to remember that. We've heard so much about Ubuntu and the spirit of Ubuntu, but I remember also Abraham Rasool's reminder that there's a hard edge to Ubuntu, which is that I am my brother's keeper, that we have the responsibility to act. So with words and ideas and experience, prophetic voices, calls to action, demands for action, for peace, for caring, for compassion, I think we all leave with a powerful sense of what we can do and what we must do together. I started out talking about something that echoes in my mind always, which is this phrase, NATO. No action, talk only. And so through these days, I have been echoing or thinking of alternatives, and I came up with some other acronyms of BRAVE and GRACE. The one that I'm going to mention now is ADVANCE, because it has some words in it that I think reflect our discussions here. So A is for accountability, something we heard time and time again, that we have, and we need to build practical mechanisms for accountability. I think we heard a lot about determination, commitment to action, a vision, inspired and directed vision, the prophetic voice, action, and the courage for action. Now that this is a Kairos moment, that this is a moment when we can be transformational. The crisis is danger and opportunity. Compassion, grace, and spirit, and finally, empowerment and inspiration. So those, I think, are some of the thoughts that echo as we move away from talk and the need for dialogue and learning from each other to action. So I'll end with just one thing. In a theater, what happens at the end is that one by one, the cast comes out and takes a bow. We can't do that here, but let's imagine everyone, the sound technicians, the people who've served us food, the people who've arranged our hotels, they all need to come out. Each one of you who's participated in any of these plenaries and panels, who's contributed your discussions, who's written blogs, who's posted on social media, thank you to all of you. Thank you so much also to our colleagues in the G20 Interfaith family. It is a family of people who are volunteers. Almost everyone is doing this work because of caring and passion. They volunteer hours and hours of time, many Zoom calls, many hours on planes. So for the large team from Utah, I'd add the team from Georgetown, the foundations that have helped us over the years and had patience with us. But I think that the greatest, the final call of this cast as they come to the stage is the local organizing committee. Our friends, as Whitney has highlighted, who have put in so much effort and made this event a truly South African event, where we have learned about South Africa, about South Africa's challenges. We're reminded of the miracle of South Africa's transition, which is very much in my professional life and experience. 1994 was a great year, a year with Mandela, who remains, I think, one of the greatest inspirations among all world leaders ever. He is our model, Mandiba, our example, but so many others, men and women, young and old. So a special thanks to all of you. I won't name people, I won't go into that because we don't have time and the planes are waiting. But I wanted to end with this sense of deep appreciation for the learning, for the fellowship, for the caring, for the passion, for the disagreements about how we should handle, what we should do. And with this commitment that we will be taking our issues, our 5 issues, but also the others, forward in every way that our imagination, our energy, our creativity, our intelligence, and our spirit allows. Because we care, we believe so deeply that the voices that you represent, the experience you represent, the commitment you represent, belong at the tables all the way from the most senior leadership in the world, which is reflected in the G20, to every community and every family. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a wonderful act of appreciation and gratitude. Thank you. His Majesty, the King Mahlangu, has requested to have a word. And who am I, as a subject, to refuse the king if he says he wants to have a word? I would like to invite him to take the podium.
I should say thank you Greeting to everybody again. We've been greeting each other. His Excellency Minister, Deputy President of G20, all the organizers in this place, professors, academics, religions, all the interfaith. We thank you for such of an opportunity and a moment to host the G20 in South Africa. It is a privilege. We've been held here. We've been educated here. We've been in a hospital. We're out of the ICU. Indeed, we can say whatever that G20 and interfaith, because interfaith is our home, us as religion and as the believers and as religious as well, and culture, that is where it lies. Now it is our responsibility that we are going and work, and we are so delighted being partaking within these gatherings. So we saw that we can do it together. Let's pull together. We'll win, we'll succeed. And it shows the interface that they gave us the opportunity of participating, of planning. We're no longer crying. Says the world, the Africa and the continent, and the entire globe of the continent of the world. We're in a safe hands. Let's unite as we have thrived within this, and let's advocate peace. Ubuntu, we thank you for different tribes. We saw all religions. It was in a spirit, and we have healed. We have hope now. Now we have hope. We heard our ministers, guest speakers, that you are aligned, working with us as the interface and the G20. We are one. Prof. Mutsecha and many speakers, they've said, we are created, our God is sun, the earth and the soil, and the water you're drinking. So thank you for everything that you have done. And also the organizers in such of a good event. Maybe in centuries, as we are living here, we're never going to see this in South Africa. But we are already in, count us in, wherever we're moving. We are not going to stop. We are at your disposal. Let's work together. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have done well. And when we had meetings, there were very critical voices in the meeting. And some of the critical voices were from Professor Motsecha, Manaraj, Michael Sway, and others. Because we were wrestling with how to make sure that the conference succeeds. And I want to thank you for entrusting the leadership of G20 to me as your leader, and you listen to me and you work together. I just want to appreciate this moment. I had men and women of dedication who gave their all for the success of the G20 conference. Thank you, thank you. Sandile has been very meticulous because he took the conference. Can you stand up, please? Thank you so much. He came in at a time when the conference was just about to collapse. And your intervention saved the situation. Here we are today because of you in many ways, and our support as well. Einstein once said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking or tools we have used to to create them. One of the key questions I've been asking is whether the tools of conferencing and dialogue, are they new or old? Or were they used to create the problems we are dealing with today? And my answer was no. It's a new way, new tools, because the tools that we are responsible for creating the problems we are trying to solve are the problems of domination, the problems of separation, the problems of inequality, the problems that looked down upon others. So today, we have honed new skills, new ways of being, and new ways of creating communities. What remains? What remains is that we need a plan. The plan with time frame. A plan which must be assessed for its efficacy and effectiveness. Unless we do this would appear to be like one of those many conferences we've had. The call, the agitation, the type of activities that we had agreed we're going to do must shape the future of G20 going forward. And we've agreed, at least speaking to some of the G20 members, that we need a legacy project to continue the work. Now that we have got the South African theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, interpreted globally, continentally, and locally, it is important for South Africans to draw strength, understanding, and intellectual analysis and use that, and how best can we use these three concepts to build communities in South Africa. And with these few words, I want to say, have a bon voyage, but before I do that, Catherine will dissolve the congregation. I invite her to dissolve the congregation.
I have to say that's a first for me. I don't know how to dissolve a congregation. But I think what it means is thank you once again, onward and upward, advance and forward. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful trip home. And let's remain friends for the duration.
Before you all depart, I'm sure you can see on the screen there's a QR code. This QR code is a way for the G20 Interfaith Forum to receive feedback of your experience. We kindly ask that you scan the code, fill out the form, and give the organization